Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. Another solid season. Not as good as last season, but still some pretty good stuff this year. Big thing this season compared to last season. Last season took advantage of the breaks and did the 3, they call them pods, and it was a really cool way of doing it. It was a little bit more comic booky in a way where you tell these 3-4 issue story arcs, and then maybe at the end of the year everything kind of paid off. This season they only have one big break, and they basically did the 2 pods. As far as the first pod, it was a pretty cool start. It would get a little monotonous at times. As it went on, you found yourself caring less and less about the people that they were interacting with, because the storylines got involved in, number one, going back to the past, and you're not going to see these future characters. And number two, they want to avoid this future from happening, so whether those characters lived or died was irrelevant, because this history was hopefully going to be rewritten. I think the future stuff really started to click when they went back. They did the episode with Fitz, and we see what happened to him while the team was in space, and then he is brought into the future, and I think things got a lot better there. I absolutely loved him slipping to this almost evil bounty hunter role like so seamlessly, because just that experience that he got being the Doctor, being in the framework last season, not only gave him that edgier character that he could dig into, but it also made him better fighter, better at a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, so I think even at the end of the season there was a lot of plot holes with this whole sequence about going in the future. I don't know what it was really supposed to accomplish besides just being cool, as far as something the writers did for the audience. I mean, it seemed like there would have been an easier way to tell them, hey, the Earth is going to explode, saving Coulson's the reason, and a few other details, because they basically barely pieced together what they were supposed to do in the future. Then they go back and almost nothing they learned seemed like it helped them save the day. And we'll roll that into the second pod, which the second pod things get kind of grounded again. It makes it almost boring. You got a lot of new characters. You have General Hale, which ends up being Hydra again. Ruby, again, she was a strange character because she's introduced as a super fan of Daisy, and then it flips it, she kind of just wants to kill her. I mean, really a lot of the stuff they introduced character-wise didn't matter that much at the end of the season. I mean, Ruby ends up dying, Hale ends up dying, and they kind of just helped S.H.I.E.L.D. team get where they needed to be, but I don't know, this is weird. The biggest surprise of the season, really, not just the second pod, was Talbot. Didn't know how much of a role he would have, because I know the actor also does some stuff on Supergirl, so his time might be kind of limited between the 2 shows, but as the season progressed, he just went from this physically and mentally wounded character from his gunshot wound last season to being tortured, to being a broken man, to suddenly stepping in and becoming Graviton, which really came out of nowhere. And it was just so cool seeing that a lot of different plot threads hanging since the first season, in particular that whole Graviton thing finally being paid off for this big season finale was really awesome. That was probably one of the biggest MCU loose ends. This season, as usual, there were some great character moments, especially as the season starts going on. It really picks up. I mean, first of all, there's some kind of more cute stuff, but nice. The whole Fitz and Gemma and their engagement, and that was pretty well done. But as you get to the 100th episode, you just have the whole sequence where Coulson reveals that he's dying, and the team's reaction to it was just so well done, and you just feel the emotion, especially from Daisy, and just how much she sees Coulson as a father figure. It was beautifully done. Great acting all around. You finally get to roll into the May and Coulson storyline of them being a couple, more or less, or having feelings for each other. Also well done. Not as emotionally out there as the Daisy stuff. Just solid acting again on that part. And as far as the 100th episode goes, it was a very cliche TV show sci-fi thing to have a fear dimension that your greatest fears come to life. I mean, it's really corny. It's something that the show has kind of stayed away from for the most part. I think they've done slightly more grounded takes on some of the superhero stuff that we've seen before. But I think as far as having an episode where they could bring back a lot of stuff from the past and find a way to celebrate that, I think it worked. And of course, it ends with the very well done wedding for Fitz and Simmons, and then on top of that, the official reveal that Deke was their grandson and came back in time with them. So just very, very well done episode. The season finale, which up until a few days before it was released, it looked like it was going to be the final episode ever, and then they got their renewal for next season. Now the episode overall, great episode, and if it ended with this episode, I think it would have been a great series finale, and it would have been perfect almost. A couple of tweaks, I think it would have been perfect. That was a great episode. Just so much impending doom because the last few pieces are falling into place of the future that they were trying to avoid. I mean, Daisy getting out of the Quinjet. I mean, probably the exact same shot that they saw in the second episode. But the biggest complaint about this episode, and I don't know if they weren't allowed to use this stuff or just what happened, but the thing we learned from The Simpsons is you cannot talk about the fireworks factory and not show the fireworks factory. And they made the choice to have 2 or 3 episodes in a row that mentioned Infinity War. They mentioned what's happening in New York, which is pretty heavily implied to be the fight with Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Thanos' forces. And then they blatantly mentioned Thanos' forces attacking Earth in I think it was the next episode. So you're thinking they gotta have the payoff of what happened at the end of Avengers Infinity War affecting the end of this show, which would be a nice cliffhanger to roll into next season. And they completely did nothing. And I mean, as far as the structured episode, I don't think it would have worked having everybody, be affected by the Avengers. But if you're gonna tease us with that many episodes and then just completely ignore it, it just kind of takes the wind out of it. The other big, what I call the bait and switch from the episode is obviously Fitz dies, and then they all kind of point out, well, actually, Fitz is still frozen in space at this point, and really you kind of got to get him back because the future that he's supposed to wake up in is not the future he was trying to get to, where S.H.I.E.L.D. was on this lighthouse and it was the end of the world. They averted that, but the other part of that is he dies, and then they come back and everyone's all super sad and they're having a funeral for him, and then it's like, oh no, we're just kidding. It's not the characters, but the show was like, nope, sorry, it's actually a going away party for Coulson, and Fitz is fine. I thought they were a little shady. They rolled into it. They kind of dragged out the sadness of this character death that really wasn't a death. Again, solid emotional stuff with that episode. Just like I said, the bond between Daisy and Coulson, just never realized how strong it was until this episode. Not this episode, but this season. Gets a little tricky here as far as trying to pick out the best episodes. I think there were 2 or 3 really good candidates for the best episodes. I'm still going to go with the first one, the Orientation Part 1, not Part 2. I'm going to count it as a separate episode. I just love the way that they're just thrown into this future scenario, but no one really knows what's happening. The team's trying to figure it out. The audience is trying to learn it with them, and then at the end, they just hit you with everything at once. 3 different groups all find out at the same time that they're not just in space; they're in the future, and in a future where the Earth has been destroyed. And it was such an exhilarating finish to that episode, just jaw dropping. The honorable mention, though, it's the 14th episode with I think it's the Devil Complex, where once again we're actually, that's a good bait and switch where we think, okay, the Spirit Dimension has created the Doctor version of Fitz from the framework, and then there's a really cool reveal that this whole time Fitz more or less let an alternate personality sort of take over him, and he was doing everything himself, the real Fitz, and just doing some the ends justify the means type of stuff to get everybody. He's got people held at gunpoint. He's cutting in the Daisy and removing her inhibitor. And it was just a really cool episode. They kind of just got him back to being regular Fitz again after a few episodes. They played a little bit up on the fact that he'll do whatever it takes, and he was just Fitz again after that. So that kind of downplayed the significance down the road. But other than that, it was amazing episode. I was going to say my least favorite episode, and it wasn't necessarily bad, was the second part of the opening two-parter, the orientation part 2. Just, it seemed like it got a little monotonous. There's a lot of stuff that never even played out, became important the rest of the season. The whole Deke had this whole framework-esque bar you could go to and visit different places that, like, he could like to go to Earth in its prime. There's a lot of stuff that didn't seem like it really played out that well. It just didn't do it for me. And at the time, it was really corny for them to say, oh, it was Daisy that was responsible for destroying the Earth, which, from her power set, it didn't seem like there's any way she could do it. It just seemed, in fact, the reason, them even telling you that it was her that did it makes it seem so unlikely that she was the one doing it. It had to be somebody else. And it was also disappointing because when you're watching this episode, and Infinity War is around the corner, and you see this Earth split in two, you're like, wow, is this something Thanos did? And you're hoping it's going to tie into it somehow, and then it's not. It wasn't Thanos, it was just Quake, and it was just kind of cheesy. I'll go through the notes, a few odds and ends that I didn't talk about yet. Really dug the Enoch character. He seemed to get more and more entertaining as he went along. I guess there's a chance we could see him again if they track down Frozen Fitz. Enoch's on the ship with him, and he has no reason to go to the future now either, so maybe he'll be back next season. Another really cool callback this season was the return of Robin, the daughter of the man who could see not just a man, the Inhuman that could see the future from, I think it was season 3. And it's really cool bringing her back. They did some pretty interesting stuff with her. We met her as a young girl. We've seen some other flashbacks where she's a little bit older. And this led to another great arc with May, where May found out basically got to be a mother to this girl. And, knowing we know how May never got to be a mother, that was a really great emotional beat for her character. And then we see the, really old Robin and her final day. So that was a pretty cool, not only callback, bringing her back, but they did some interesting stuff with her. Another silly thing, I'll just bring it up and I'll go through my notes. They made this big fuss about nobody seemed to know who built this lighthouse or anything about it. Everything's unknown. Maybe he didn't get time to look into it too much. But there was nothing. It was just ended up just being something that S.H.I.E.L.D. built, and everything just kind of was like an open book after that point. Even Noah seemed to know everything a lot more about it. So that was just kind of goofy. It didn't seem to pay off later on. I thought the Odium was kind of goofy at first, but it actually ends up being pretty vital to the season finale, so I'll let it slide. I like the way it did pay off, so that was pretty cool. Another thing that didn't work out that great was Hale putting together a team. You had Von Strucker with his new super memory, and obviously she had Ruby, she had Carl Creel, the Absorbing Man, and it looked like it was going to be maybe a cool super team versus the S.H.I.E.L.D. team, and then it just never really panned out like that. Strucker was just there to help build their device and then get his head crushed, basically, by Ruby. And one thing they did good here, I think I mentioned in my Arrow review, there was this kind of manufactured tension to put the team in odds. I think here in S.H.I.E.L.D., they did a really logical thing where you got the science people, basically, and you also got Yo-Yo, who met her future self and has a little bit more knowledge than everybody else, having one opinion on how they should proceed, and then the rest of the team kind of thinking with their hearts about what they should do. And then you get down to a great moment where they have to decide, do they save Coulson or do they save the world? And I thought that was really well done. As far as next season, I really don't know where you go from there. I mean, they're basically more or less writing off Coulson. I mean, yeah, they could always find a way for him to come back, but I think he's more or less done. Every season seems like it could be the last, so I'm thinking if there's any other loose ends they could tie up, this is the time to do it. I don't know other major ones come to mind. I think last season there was a strange moment where there was that new Inhuman, I don't remember the name of the character, his sister was the senator that was against Inhumans, and he gets killed and he floats to the bottom of the ocean, and it looks like he gets a new Terrigenesis cocoon. So does he come back? Does that play into something? Maybe since Inhumans got canceled, there's a chance to maybe meet up with the Black Bolt and his team. Maybe this guy's a threat at the bottom of the ocean. I don't know. That's just one possible way to take it. And I don't got too much else to say about it. Again, I still love the show. Hoping that the new short season actually might help condense things. Maybe they do break it in half again. We'll see. And like I said, I got a slightly more detailed and not as spoiler-filled review on my site, soundedbettermyhead.com. I got the comic strips there. I got other reviews. And that's about it. Thanks for watching.